Staying alive in deep space is no easy matter. For the astronauts aboard the first spacecraft to Mars, their last look back at Earth is a distant memory.
Meteorite shower, meteorite shower. Roger, we're coming in.
Any hope of rescue is long past. These 6 people have gone further than anyone before. Now they're completely on their own. Mars sits waiting, beckoning, at the other end, hundreds of millions of kilometers away. But to get there, the astronauts have to cross a minefield of deep space dangers. And it's not just meteorites that will endanger their lives. Weightlessness seems like harmless fun, but months in zero gravity wreak havoc on the human body.
They will come back with the bone of a 90-year-old individual.
Bone and muscle loss have plagued long-duration flights for almost 30 years.
Artificial gravity is the holy grail when it comes to long-duration weightlessness on your way to Mars.
And there's another deadly force waiting in deep space. Cosmic radiation, generated at the core of dying stars, explodes out across the solar system.
Fireworks, celestial fireworks would be going off in my brain. This is cosmic radiation.
Microscopic missiles pass through the skin of a spacecraft like a pin through a child's balloon.
Very low doses of this cosmic ray can destroy brain cells.
Scientists and engineers believe cosmic rays can be beaten, and the search is on for solutions.
13.
But the best protection may be to send robotic astronauts to do the most dangerous work required on the journey to Mars.
We're going to give them the very best technology we've got so they come back safely.
For 2.5 years, 6 people will be caregivers to one another. It's them against the universe.
Clear it.
On a mission to Mars, the #1 goal is staying alive. This is not really what life is like in deep space. TV and movies make it look easy by adding make-believe gravity to their make-believe spacecraft. This is the reality of zero gravity. No gravity at all, everything floats. People who've been there like it.
You know, you're out in space and it is effortless. You're just literally floating everywhere. It's absolutely wonderful.
It is so easy to move about by just pushing on a wall. A small little pressure and you float in the other direction.
But it's not good for your body.
We end up losing muscle mass, we end up losing bone mass, and we also lose the ability to stand upright or even to sit upright.
U.S. astronaut Heidi Piper trained like all her colleagues for a space shuttle mission in 2006. But when she returned to Earth, Piper got a surprise.
And so I figure I could stand here, standing enough.
Piper's legs buckled after just 12 days in weightlessness. How will the Mars crew be affected by up to 2 years of zero gravity? Retired U.S. astronaut Jerry Linenger knows all about the muscle-sapping power of zero gravity. He spent over 3,000 hours in space, including nearly 5 months on the Russian space station Mir. In that time, he lost 65% of his muscle strength. Before zero gravity, Linenger could easily lift 45 kilos over his head. After 5 months weightless in space, he could only manage 16 kilos.
You're my main guy, yeah. 2 or 3 year trip to Mars, I think you can expect some very severe muscle atrophy.
It's estimated the trip to Mars, 6 months there and 6 months back, would result in a 50% loss in muscle strength. And it's not just the muscles that are affected. Zero gravity is tough on the bones, too.
For a 40, 45-year-old male going out on that trip and coming back, they will come back with the bone of a 90-year-old individual.
The bones lose their calcium and become brittle. They could snap just opening a hatch. A misstep could break an ankle or a leg.
None of us want to go and send an astronaut to Mars and have him or her land there weak, jellyfish, unable to support the skeleton, risk of fracture.
For the Mars mission, finding a solution to zero gravity is top on the agenda. The Russians may have the answer. They already have experience with long-duration flights and its effect on cosmonauts. For 20 years, they've been looking for a solution. The fix may come by creating weightlessness on Earth. After just 7 days stretched out in a rubberized bag, floating in water, most test subjects lose 40% of their strength. To beat that effect, engineers have created a suit fitted out with bungee cords that will make their muscles work all the way to Mars. And electronic pulses that trick leg muscles into expanding and contracting. It's not high tech, but it goes some way to keeping the bones and muscles in shape. The standard countermeasure in orbit now is daily workouts. 2 to 4 hours a day of grim exercise, very unpopular with the crews.
A lot of self-discipline, though, to get on that treadmill in the first place, because it is not a very pleasant experience.
And it's not all that effective.
You just have a hard time countering 22 hours of floating effortlessly.
The best way to solve the problem is to create gravity on board the Mars ship.
Artificial gravity is the holy grail when it comes to protecting the astronauts against the deconditioning that goes with long-duration weightlessness on your way to Mars.
To create artificial gravity, the Mars spaceship must be designed to spin. It works like a merry-go-round. The centrifugal force presses on the crew's bodies, just like the Earth's gravitational pull. Early designs of artificial gravity spacecraft were huge, too big to be practical.
Up to 100 meters in diameter, spinning very slowly. Guaranteed to work, guaranteed never to fly because of its expense. But one design which is very appealing and would not be terribly expensive would consist of a spacecraft and its power supply separated by a tether.
The Mars spaceship will start the journey like a rocket. But when it hits cruising speed, they cut the engines and switch to the slow turning mode.
Spin up for artificial gravity has been initiated. 0.7 G at 4.5.
When the spacecraft reaches the right spinning speed, it establishes artificial gravity for the crew. The technology to create gravity in an entire spacecraft could be years away, so Lawrence Young is developing an alternative at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Hi, you comfortable in there?
Yeah, really good.
Let's see you step on each foot. We've got a 20.
Only the person using the machine feels artificial gravity. This is easier, cheaper technology than spinning an entire vehicle and crew.
You don't live on the artificial gravity centrifuge, you visited it.
For 45 minutes to an hour every day or so, astronauts on their way to Mars could strap themselves in and get enough gravity to maintain muscles and bone strength.
Okay, we are almost ready to start.
Right now there's one hitch. It has some unpleasant and possibly dangerous side effects.
Are you okay?
Yeah, ready.
The brain gets a level of what we call sensory conflict and reacts to it by all of the symptoms of motion sickness.
People get motion sickness on Young's machine because it's compact. It has to spin very quickly to create artificial gravity. coming off Young's machine, an astronaut can get seasick. To fix that, researchers watch the test subject's eyes through tiny cameras.
What we see is vertical eye movements, which tells us that he and his brain is confused. He thinks he's tumbling head over heels when he is spinning in a circle on the centrifuge.
What really gets the brain confused is spinning and turning the head. And on a mission to Mars, astronauts may have to do just that.
3, 2, 1, now.
A crew member, confused and seasick for even a short while, is not an option. While Young and his team perfect their centrifuge, researchers in California have built their own gravity generator, a space cycle. A person pedaling gets a traditional workout. The spinning passenger actually gets up to 5 times Earth's gravity.
We may find out that hypergravity training actually accelerates the training effect. You may have to spend less time doing it.
Even if the technology to create artificial gravity is finally mastered, waiting in deep space is another, more deadly, invisible force. Microscopic bits of matter can blast right through the skin of the spacecraft and through the bodies of the people inside. As a crew bound for Mars passes into deep space, leaving the protective cocoon of Earth's magnetic field, the bombardment of their spacecraft begins. An invisible and dangerous force passes through the skin of the spacecraft and the bodies of the people inside.
On your way to Mars, you are going to get zapped very severely with lots of radiation.
The microscopic threat is created by dying stars exploding supernovas. The blast propels carbon, iron, and uranium, the founding elements of our world, out across the universe at close to the speed of light. It's cosmic radiation. It can be lethal, and it's inescapable.
I'd turn my head 90 degrees. I'd see little contrails going by. I'd say, okay, I'm getting hit by something.
Jerry Lininger, an astronaut and medical doctor, could sense cosmic radiation invading his body.
Whatever ill effects that radiation might have is obviously increasing day by day by day when you're out there in space. Sometimes at night, I used to sleep on a wall. I used to sleep upside down on the wall, close my eyes, and all of a sudden I'd see flash, flash, flash. Sort of looked like a pinpoint light, very bright.
Jeffrey Hoffman, another former astronaut, had similar reactions to cosmic radiation during 1,200 hours in space.
I would be sitting there with my eyes closed, and these fireworks, celestial fireworks, would be going off in my brain. And you realize, yeah, this is cosmic radiation.
Lininger and Hoffman react to their cosmic radiation exposure with the expected astronaut bravery, but their health could yet pay a price. Cancer. Cosmic rays pierce cells, damaging DNA strands. The damaged DNA becomes mutated and cancerous when it can't repair itself completely and multiplies itself millions of times.
They're going to probably take older people on that mission to Mars. I don't think it's going to be the 35-year-old person, because the lifetime cancer risk when that person comes back is going to be very high. So you have to tell them that risk up front, maybe take an older, healthy person, and you live with that cancer risk when you get back.
Cancer is a long-term threat. The short-term health danger for astronauts is equally frightening. Brain damage.
Engine throttle back.
The area of the brain most vulnerable is the part that's vital to learning and memory.
Terra Nova Houston. We show all systems nominal.
NASA is using one of the largest tools on Earth, a particle accelerator, to learn more about the effects of cosmic radiation. Researcher Marcelo Vasquez loads a liquid containing brain cells into the accelerator. The accelerator is buried underground. Put simply, it's a huge circular racetrack for subatomic particles. Powerful magnets placed around the track accelerate the particles to half the speed of light. The speeding particles smash into the brain cell samples. This is how cosmic rays in outer space enter the brains of astronauts.
Okay, we are ready for next exposure.
Vasquez wants to know how many direct hits human brain cells can take. He's got bad news for astronauts involved in a long-haul mission to Mars.
Very low doses of this cosmic ray can destroy brain cells.
Cosmic rays can leak through Earth's magnetic field. Astronaut Jerry Linenger was hit by cosmic rays while on Space Station Mir inside Earth's orbit. There was no place to hide.
You are going to get zapped with lots of radiation. Try to get behind a lead battery, try to cover up, do whatever I could. You just have to live with it.
So far, Linenger has suffered no long-term effects. But in deep space, taking the full force of the radiation, the Mars crew would be susceptible to brain damage. A crew member with a shaky memory and a sudden learning disability could endanger the mission. The only solution is to find a material that can shield the spacecraft. But that's not as easy as it sounds.
You're not going to be able to shield a vehicle unless you make it out of lead, and you just can't launch a vehicle like that.
Lead is far too heavy, but NASA must find a better shielding material if they're going to Mars. The search for a new lightweight shielding material is going on here at NASA's research lab in Langley, Virginia.
4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is specimen number 1. We're studying this for our radiation shielding project. So we're gonna pull it in tension. You've got it loaded, Steve?
Yes.
Before materials engineer Sheila Thibault can sign off on a material to protect astronauts from the deadly atmosphere of deep space, it has to meet exacting standards. Thibault has watched hundreds of these procedures searching for the perfect material.
This is 16 years worth of effort to find the perfect shielding material for a human mission to Mars. We have learned that a material with high hydrogen is very good.
Luckily for the engineers, hydrogen can come in several forms: the astronauts' food supply, drinking water, or even human waste. One shield is made of a surprisingly familiar product.
This is polyethylene, and that works very well for radiation shielding.
Polyethylene is so good, it's used by the crew of the International Space Station to line their sleeping quarters against cosmic rays. For a Mars vehicle, polyethylene will be just one ingredient of a much stronger composite material. NASA began looking at composites after discovering that aluminum, its standard for spacecraft materials since the Apollo mission to the moon, had a hidden danger.
Aluminum is not a good radiation shield for cosmic radiation.
When cosmic radiation hits the aluminum, it breaks up atoms in the metal, which generate even more dangerous radioactive particles inside the spacecraft.
It's 2,000 pounds.
Thibault is looking for a composite that can do double duty, block cosmic rays, and be very strong.
3,000 pounds.
It will have to stand up to the rigors of the launch, the journey to Mars, and the landing.
13.
This piece of graphite fiber stands up to 5,000 kilos of tearing strength.
We're really expecting a lot out of this particular material. We know that it's a good radiation shield, but we want to apply it also for the primary structure of a vehicle to Mars.
The astronauts' lives depend on the right choice. The team at Langley has only one chance to get it right. Meanwhile, an ex-astronaut who has been exposed to cosmic radiation has his own ideas. At MIT, Jeffrey Hoffman, now a professor, has an idea that takes its inspiration from the magnetic field shielding Earth.
Is to take our spacecraft, which we're representing as being a cylinder, we have astronauts inside, and protect that from the incoming cosmic rays by surrounding it with a magnetic field.
It's called a magnetosphere. Electrical coils surrounding the spacecraft receive a huge magnetic charge generated inside the vehicle. Just like Earth's shield, charged particles are bent around it. But Hoffman's magnetic field must be more powerful than the field surrounding Earth.
The Earth has a rather weak magnetic field, as magnetic fields go in the universe.
But Earth's shield is huge, so a charged particle hit is distributed over a vast area. Not so with a tiny spacecraft. It needs a super strong magnetic field to take the full force of the charged particles. Technology to generate enough power for this shield could be years away, but pursuing it is a must.
If we're going to ever really become a spacefaring civilization and do this as a matter of course, radiation protection has got to be a part of the equation.
Cosmic rays are not the only threat lying out in deep space. The bigger danger sits at the center of the solar system, the sun. It's a destroyer, daring us on our quest for Mars. Getting by this ball of flames and energy will require precision and luck. The sun, centerpiece of our planetary system. It gives life, but in the case of a mission to Mars, it can end life horribly.
Attention, solar monitor confirms flare eruption.
Central, predict magnitude.
X20.
We have less than an hour before the proton storm reaches us.
It's the Goliath of the solar system. Just 1 second of its energy could power North America for 9 million years. Sometimes without warning, the sun's power flips out of control. Solar flares erupt with the energy of 40 billion Hiroshima-sized atom bombs. Flares precede solar storms more powerful than 10 million volcanoes, pushing charged particles across the solar system. All this poses deadly odds against human explorers in deep space.
These charged particles can be devastating, but a major storm without protection could really cause acute illness and potentially death.
On Earth, a thick atmosphere and our magnetic shield take the brunt of the sun's energy. But even so, solar events can sometimes disrupt global communications systems and electrical power grids.
Very high energy particles actually made that transition, that transit from the sun to the Earth in about a third the speed of light. So they were here in about 15, 20 minutes.
And yet we don't quite know what causes that.
That's correct. It's, again, another big challenge.
Yes, right.
No space weather storms observed the past 24 hours. Space weather for the next 24 hours is expected to be minor.
Clearly, the sun must be on our enemy list on the voyage to Mars. In Boulder, Colorado, people are watching the sun 24/7. Satellites send back information. The key is tracking the sun's magnetic fields. They can twist so violently, the sun's magnetic north and south poles trade positions.
We are seeing a high-speed solar wind stream, so we are seeing some elevated electrons over the next few days that may impact spacecraft.
Forecasters look for sunspots, the first sign that a solar storm is brewing.
But there's so many variables. We're talking about a distance from the sun to Mars of over 140 million miles.
Sometimes solar storms move too fast, millions of kilometers an hour. To get accurate forecasts of impending solar storms, the mission planners would have to launch several satellites designed to give weather warnings ahead of the manned launch to Mars. The best advance warnings solar storm forecasters can give right now may not be fast enough.
It's not quite adequate, is it, to
No,
give 10 to
no.
15 minutes? They need more time to protect themselves from that kind of radiation. It's, again, another big challenge.
The science of solar forecasting is evolving. Some of NASA's Apollo missions were sent up more with hope than certainty about potential solar storms.
Any future missions that we have involving great excursions away from the Earth, we're not going to be able to rely on luck.
The odds against encountering a solar storm on a 12-day moon mission are slim compared with the months of deep space travel to Mars and back.
It's almost inconceivable to me that we could have a Mars mission and simply hope that there wouldn't be a major solar event.
Daniel Baker thinks solar storms are so dangerous they require a specially designed shelter. One component is part hydrogen.
Imagine a layered system with a heavy metallic inner core into which people could crawl, and then around that might be lighter materials like water.
Hydrogen in the water helps shield the crew members from the radiation. They'll have to stay there for the duration of the storm. They've been known to last for weeks. If charged particles get through the spacecraft's skin, they could overload microprocessors, shutting them down. If a reboot doesn't get the system back online, the Mars astronauts are in trouble. Radiation-hardened electronics with multiple backups are now in development. A Mars vehicle is run by computers. Blank screens on vital operation systems could turn the spacecraft into a casket. Perhaps the most ambitious proposal for beating back solar radiation once again takes its cue from Earth's protective magnetic shield. Researchers at NASA's Kennedy Space Center call this an electrostatic radiation shield. Its center ring is positively charged. The outrigger is negatively charged. The two force fields should combine to deflect solar radiation. When the spacecraft gets close to Mars, it slips out of the inner ring and moves on to the red planet. NASA had its first brush with a solar radiation storm danger on the International Space Station in 2005. The vehicle was hit by a wave of charged particles packing millions of volts. All on board survived, but had an astronaut been outside spacewalking, it would have been tragic. Over the course of the journey to Mars, spacewalks for maintenance and repairs could be unavoidable.
We have to make the call as soon as the flare erupts, so we have to get to that point where we can tell when that eruption is going to occur, hopefully an hour or two in advance. We are not there right now.
Going outside the spacecraft, Mars mission planners are doing everything they can to protect the astronauts, and that may include replacing them. Robotic astronauts will stand in for humans, taking on dangers never faced before in space exploration. Millions of kilometers from Earth, with no hope of rescue. Meteorite debris makes contact with the skin of the Mars spacecraft, triggering a warning light inside. Searing through deep space at 90,000 kilometers an hour, someone has to go outside and take a look at the damage. This will be the most dangerous spacewalk ever undertaken in the dark and threatening vacuum of space.
I'm out there, self-contained spacecraft essentially. Any space debris comes by, hits you, violates the suit, rapid decompression, you're gone.
Former astronaut Jerry Linenger spent more than 5 hours on a single spacewalk. The danger level was huge, but he had Earth to comfort him. Linenger could even see his home state. No one has ever stepped out of a spacecraft beyond the protection of Earth's orbit. If the solar storm warning goes off now, millions of kilometers into deep space, the crew will have to get back inside quickly. Spacewalking isn't so different than deep-sea diving. If a diver comes to the surface too quickly, the rapid change in water pressure can cause decompression sickness or the bends. For an astronaut, the same thing can happen by simply suiting up for a spacewalk. Pressure in the crew cabin is higher than inside the spacesuit. Nitrogen in the astronaut's blood can start bubbling, doubling the victim over in extreme pain, and then unconsciousness. If the bubbles reach the brain, it's instant death. Spacesuit engineering is complicated. In the 60s, the Russians thought they beat the bends, but almost killed a cosmonaut. Preparing for a historic first spacewalk, Alexei Leonov's spacesuit was pressurized to the same level as his spacecraft. But Leonov couldn't fit back into the spacecraft. His spacesuit had expanded. Trapped in space, he had to think fast. Hanging by a tether in space, Leonov had to open a valve on his spacesuit, bleeding off oxygen until he could squeeze back inside. Astronauts gearing up for Mars must get through boot camp at the Johnson Space Center.
It's much easier to practice and rehearse a procedure here where we can stop if we have to, verify something, change out hardware.
Canadian astronaut Dave Williams spent 16 days on a space shuttle mission. Williams trains others for spacewalks. They practice on an exact replica of their spaceship.
It's pretty amazing to train underwater at this neutral buoyancy laboratory. In many ways, it's identical to performing a spacewalk.
Underwater rehearsals give astronauts the feel of working in outer space, but some situations can't be practiced in water. Every astronaut's nightmare is the tether breaking. They would drift into the dark silence of space, dying alone when the air runs out. The safety backup for this scenario is a rocket pack, updated from the original, built 30 years ago. And this is how they train to use it.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do a pitch maneuver so you're facing where you came from.
When you come off structure and you're tumbling head over heels, you need to be able to reorient yourself to where you came off structure and start getting back to that location. There's really no other way to train that except in the virtual reality world. So I'd reach out, probably just grab onto structure here. So looks like we've got it.
You got it. Beautiful. 52%. And it was 4 minutes, 56 seconds. Plenty of battery left still, too. Yeah, we're just going to reset it.
We take this very seriously. It's very real when we're interacting with the visual environment. We treat it like we really would be flying it.
Rocket packs, a staple of deep space science fiction, are now the one thing standing between an astronaut and death.
You're always tethered in 2 different places. If one tether breaks, you're still tethered to structure. And this would be a last resort if you came loose.
The next step for NASA is to minimize the human factor in the spacewalk. The answer? A huge innovation. A machine created to withstand the deep space threats of a mission to Mars. Meet Robonaut.
We will probably never send people alone. We're going to send them with machines of all kinds.
This member of a Mars crew will never suffer from bone or muscle loss, cosmic rays, and solar storms. But Robonaut has some eerily human qualities.
Opposable thumbs are known to be a pretty good gadget, and we should have them. The ability to grasp an object designed for a human hand is a functional need.
Robonaut is tougher than any astronaut, but not quite as skilled. For that reason, it needs some human guidance. A strong and silent type, Robonaut will be the ideal workmate.
So we've really designed Robonaut to be an astronaut's assistant, to work with them safely. That means it has to be able to handle all the same objects that an astronaut would handle. It has to be designed so that it can work with the same objects without damaging the objects. If it had steel fingers, when it would grab a tool, it might leave a little nick or a burr on the handle of the tool. Hand it to an astronaut, the astronaut grasps it, cuts his glove. So the robot has to be a good assistant. It can't hurt the astronaut, or else you're not going to want it to help you at all.
The Robonaut will be useful outside the ship.
Wherever possible, we would like to have the robot set the site up first, get all the tools laid out, get everything pre-positioned, and then have the astronauts come out very quickly, do the job, and get back inside where it's safe. Humans are precious. We ask them as our heroes to go on these missions, and we're going to give them the very best technology we've got so they come back safely.
Robonaut will help reduce the chances that an astronaut will be injured or even die on the way to Mars.
We're in.
But it's impossible to reduce those odds to 0. Something could happen, and they'd better be able to deal with it. 6 people, 2.5 years together, in a spacecraft traveling at an average 90,000 kilometers an hour, going hundreds of millions of kilometers to another planet and back. Somewhere along the line, somebody is going to need a doctor, maybe even a surgeon.
Hiromi? Hiromi, look at me.
There's always a risk of an emergency situation arising in the spacecraft. What happens if you get a gallbladder inflammation on the way to Mars? How do you deal with gallstones? Toxicologic exposures, fire or smoke in the Martian habitat, depressurization, either of the habitat or of the spacesuit itself.
The possibilities seem endless. After weeks, then months, performing highly structured activities, crew members must never consider anything routine.
Moving large objects around in the absence of gravity, even though they don't weigh anything, they possess a lot of mass, so you can always crush an extremity. We need to be able to take care of them if they do in fact occur.
This is Houston, go ahead, Al. Yeah, Bill's unconscious at the moment. I'm going to need to talk to the flight surgeon as soon as possible.
This is not a spacecraft, but at this lab in Houston, they're performing medical procedures like they would hundreds of millions of kilometers from Texas.
He seems to be breathing a little bit, but he's going down.
A patient simulator, a programmable and realistic dummy capable of imitating 300 different medical scenarios, stands in for a downed astronaut.
I'm not sure what's wrong. Okay, Alpha, what I need you to do is heart with the stethoscope. I also need to get pulse.
The person's having a heart attack. They can't breathe. They're getting short of breath.
Students get their coaching over a headset. To simulate the radio contact with mission control, they'd need to handle a serious medical problem on board the spacecraft.
His pulse is a little quick. He's got about a 90 beats per minute pulse at the moment.
I have to get you in that room, and I have to actually make you believe that this patient is in trouble, and if you don't get on this right this second and do the right treatment, this patient will die. And I have to make you believe that.
Dewar's astronaut students get 28 hours training as a crew medical officer. But there's one thing Dewar's Houston lab doesn't simulate, and that's the weightlessness of space.
Okay, copy that.
The push is on to deliver a Mars spacecraft with artificial gravity. But if the system broke down, medical emergencies would have to be treated in zero gravity. To prepare for that possibility, Dewar takes his dummies to the sky.
This is an airplane that goes out at 34,000 feet, and then when you come up and over the top, you're at 0 Gs for approximately 30 seconds.
They call it the vomit comet because a lot of people get sick to the stomach. Most get used to the jumpy ride, but getting even a simple medical procedure down is tough.
In zero gravity, everything's floating off. You have to secure one piece under an arm. You have to secure another piece under another arm. You have to secure your own legs. You have to secure the pack. Otherwise, things are just floating all over the place. It's darn difficult. If I try to press on their chest, I go flying off one direction, the patient goes flying the other direction.
NASA isn't the only space agency preparing crews for weightless medical emergencies. The European Space Agency took it a step further, operating on a real patient in zero gravity. The challenge: remove a non-malignant tumor from the forearm of a volunteer. The team has questions. In zero G, will the blood flow differently? Will differences in blood pressure cause problems? Can a surgeon perform a simple operation while being weightless? As the plane made its zero G parabolic swoops, the team worked in 20-second bursts. Finally, after 3 hours and 31 weightless sequences, the operation was over. It was a success, although the patient was lifted several centimeters off the operating table during weightlessness. A Mars crew won't have a full medical team. When things get complicated, they'll need to consult with Earth. But with each passing day, radio communications with mission control will take longer and longer.
There could very well be situations where we may need a surgeon on Earth able to talk the crew medical officer through performing a procedure.
But right now, communications between Earth and a Mars spacecraft is compromised by a time delay of up to 20 minutes.
Imagine a surgeon moving an instrument and waiting 20 minutes to see what the response is.
A Mars crew will not be able to rely on expert medical advice from Earth. They'll have to handle complex procedures themselves. But the best protection will go way beyond medical training. Medical investigators will screen Mars candidates right down to the cellular level, looking deep into their DNA. One day, scientists may even go so far as altering their genes to create the perfect Mars explorer. Today, all astronauts are strictly monitored, probed and prodded, screened for every possible disease.
I'm sure they do feel like lab rats, but unfortunately that's what it takes.
Every precaution is taken to make sure they don't carry any diseases with them to the launch pad.
We limit the exposure of the crew to people so we don't get a cold or the flu or gastroenteritis or whatever, just so that we don't get sick when we're in space.
But for a Mars crew, this isn't going to be good enough. Over the course of a 2.5-year mission, a life-threatening condition could develop.
If someone's brain tumor shows up on the way to Mars, it's not going to be a good thing.
So medical screening has to go to a new level for long-duration missions. It's called genetic selection. It's a thorough examination of the candidate's DNA.
We would use this genetic screening to identify those people who are more susceptible to the radiation. So those tests will help us. They also may help us in the department of osteoporosis or bone wasting, which is a big problem for us for long-duration space. And we would screen those people from going on a mission.
A spacecraft's limited medical resources could be stretched to the limit during the long-term care for an astronaut suffering radiation sickness. Cutting a vulnerable team member before launch reduces the risk for everyone.
We're not only protecting the mission, but we're also protecting the astronaut, not only in the short term to complete the mission, but also in the long term to have a long and normal productive life.
If you want a machine to perform better, you have to know it inside out. Dave Williams believes medical science is getting closer to knowing how to get inside an astronaut's genetic code to improve their performance and reliability in space. Williams sees a time when experts in space medicine will operate on a molecular level, altering the genes of astronauts to make them more resistant to the effects of space travel.
We might actually have the capability of stimulating a gene to maintain muscle strength, to maintain the fast to slow twitch fiber ratio that we need to be able to prevent muscle wasting from taking place.
In the future, it may be possible for astronauts to be genetically doctored to suit the Mars mission.
Going to Mars will take a special kind of person to undergo the training and the medical screening to make it.
Whatever screening methods they decide to use, space agencies across the world will only select the fittest for the first manned mission to Mars. But the engineers and scientists must also be able to design the hardware that will safeguard the lives of their pioneering crew on the most hazardous journey known to humanity.
We don't want to go at the hairy edge of survival. We want to go knowing we can go back. The way the first people came here to North America from Western Europe or from Polynesia to Australia. We got to build a system, and that system has to be reliable.
New, more powerful engines will be called on to carry the crew to Mars and back. Getting a manned mission millions of kilometers to Mars is a monumental engineering challenge, and it will be met. But accomplishments measured in thrust and speed mean nothing if the people on board do not survive. The weakest link, as well as the greatest strength of any successful mission to Mars, remains the crew.
Nobody's perfect, huh?
And keeping them alive is the #1 priority. But some of the greatest threats to the mission could come from within the crew.